Kenapa harus nonton BINUS TV? Hanya BINUS TV yang punya program yang keren-keren. Dari program berita, talk show, musik, sampai jalan-jalan. Seru banget kan? Dan yang paling seru, sekarang kalian yang punya Android dan Apple nggak perlu sedih lagi. Kalian bisa nonton live streaming kami di YouTube loh. Tuh kan, hanya BINUS TV yang bisa memberi informasi seputar edukasi dan entertainment. Shh, cuma kita loh yang bagi-bagi voucher gratisan tiap bulannya. So, tunggu apa lagi? Log on to BINUS TV dan subscribe channel YouTube-nya juga ya.
You have a business, but you don't know how to increase revenue. Don't worry, our team can help you. We introduce BINUS TV. Take your business to the next level. Our creative team are expert in media partner requests, television advertisements, advertisement in mobile apps, advertorials, social media postings and online marketing, live streaming of events, digital ads placement. So, what are you waiting for? Contact us now. BINUS TV.
Yasa Singgi, lahir di Bekasi pada tanggal 23 April 1995. Ia adalah anak ketiga dari 3 bersaudara. Ia mengembangkan hasrat berwirausaha sejak ia SMA. Semula ia hanya menemukan kepuasan memperoleh hasil yang lumayan setelah berjualan. Namun lama-kelamaan, ia semakin menumbuhkan bakat wirausahanya hingga mengembangkan merek Men's Republic. Yasa Singgi ternyata BINUSian loh. Ia mengambil jurusan Marketing Communication di BINUS University. Yuk simak wawancaranya untuk mengenal BINUSian ini lebih dalam lagi.
Kesibukan saya akhir-akhir ini kuliah sambil jalanin bisnis juga. Kalau misalnya nggak ada kuliah, weekend juga biasanya saya ngisi-ngisi seminar juga di luar kota atau di Jabodetabek. Saya punya sebuah bisnis namanya Men's Republic. Men's Republic ini adalah sebuah brand fashion pria khusus anak muda dengan target market 17-25 tahun. Kita fokus di bisnis online dan juga kita masuk ke bazar-bazar tiap mall-mall besar di Jakarta. Men's Republic ini kurang lebih sudah berjalan hampir 2 tahun. Saya bangun sendiri. Sekarang ini kita punya total kurang lebih ada 150 distributor di seluruh Indonesia. Terus juga ada 4 orang karyawan yang bantu kita di sini. Kurang lebih Men's Republic sekarang ini hampir ada di semua kota di Indonesia sudah ada. Kalau produknya juga sudah melanglang buana sampai ke Makau, Hong Kong juga sudah sampai sana juga. Sekarang sekarang ini saya kuliah di BINUS, di Bina Nusantara University. Saya semester 4 marketing komunikasi, jurusannya fokusnya ambilnya ke public relation, ke PR. Kebetulan saya memang suka dengan dunia marketing dan komunikasi, jadi saya merasa apa yang saya pelajari di BINUS ini, di Markom, tentunya banyak yang bisa saya manfaatkan, yang bisa saya aplikasikan di bisnis saya di Mass Republic. Terutama dari mulai marketing, dari mulai branding, dari mulai materi-materi IMC juga, Integrated Marketing Communication, PR-nya juga dapat juga. Jadi apa yang saya dapat di kuliah banyak banget yang bisa saya terapin juga di bisnis saya, yang karena memang sejalan di bisnis saya ini kan, karena memang bisnis saya Mass Republic ini saya fokus untuk membesarkan brand. Jadi kayaknya memang materi di Markom ini kepake banget sih untuk bisnis saya. Prospeknya besar banget karena di Markom itu kita nggak cuma belajar soal marketing talk, bagaimana jualannya aja, tapi kita belajar bagaimana brandingnya, bagaimana membangun sebuah konsep brand, menyampaikan sebuah value yang ada di brand ini ke masyarakat. Bisa bagus untuk bekerja di corporate besar, bisa sebagai profesional, oke juga sebagai entrepreneur yang kita bangun bisnis sendiri juga cocok banget. Kebetulan saya mengambil jalan sebagai entrepreneur, yang saya mengambil Markom ini cocok banget untuk bisnis saya yang Mass Republic, membesarkan brand ini. Jadi prospeknya ke depan Markom itu oke banget. Menyenangkan kuliah di BINUS, pertama mahasiswanya banyak banget. Jadi pastinya relasi banyak banget. Dan juga BINUS itu menurut saya karena memang terkenal dengan IT-nya ya. Memang kuliahnya yang basicnya itu kita mau nggak mau kita harus mengikuti teknologi banget kuliahnya. Jadi seru banget lah kuliah di BINUS itu, banyak pengalaman baru, banyak teman baru. Dan networkingnya yang sangat luas banget kan, mahasiswa BINUS itu udah banyak banget. Udah gitu BINUS kan bukan cuma ada di Kemanggisan, ada di Alam Sutra juga ada, dan banyak banget karena cabang-cabangnya dari SMA semuanya. Jadi di BINUS itu prospeknya besar, mau bekerja bisa, mau kita buka bisnis sendiri jadi entrepreneur bisa. Pengalaman menariknya adalah kuliah di BINUS itu macet kali ya. tapi kuliah di BINUS asik kok, banyak teman, banyak. Dan di BINUS itu bakal ketemu segala macam jenis mahasiswa. Dari daerah mana kan, dari BINUS itu kan banyak banget perantau kan. Jadi kita jadi banyak banget belajar culture orang. Jadi culture teman-teman yang dari luar pulau itu gimana sih, dari luar Jawa itu gimana. Ngumpul dia tuh di satu Kemanggisan dan kita ketemu di situ ya, rasanya asik aja gitu. Yang pertama saya itu hobi makan warteg di samping anggrek, itu langganan. Saya itu kayaknya banyak orang nggak tahu kan ya, kayak gitu ya. Saya hobi makan warteg. Terus saya itu punya hobi jalan kaki. Karena saya sering banget pulang ke rumah atau kemana-mana dari BINUS ke Kebayoran Lama, di rumah saya itu saya sering banget jalan kaki. Karena saya suka experience jalan kaki itu, kita bisa ngelihat ada beda aja gitu experience jalan kaki dibandingkan dengan naik mobil gitu. Berdua ya. Apalagi yang ketiga ya. Saya juga suka kemana-mana sendiri, lebih suka kemana-mana sendiri. Jadi jomblo banget ya kayaknya. Nonton sendiri, makan sendiri gitu. Karena saya merasa kadang tuh kita terlalu sering di keramaian, perlu self talk ya, perlu komunikasi sama diri kita sendiri. Saya suka baca buku. Setiap hari itu saya punya kebiasaan minimal 1 jam harus baca buku. Gitu. Jadi saya itu tiap bulan punya budget tersendiri. Mungkin kalau ada orang yang tiap bulan budgetnya adalah belanja gitu, atau beli gadget baru. Kalau saya tiap bulan itu punya budget untuk beli buku. Jadi sangat hobi sekali baca buku. Gitu. Terus yang terakhir ya berarti ya, apalagi yang kelima ya. Yang kelima, saya suka ketinggian. Jadi saya punya cita-cita pengen yang kayak loncat tebing gitu. Saya tuh kalau ngeliat ketinggian tuh kayaknya tertantang aja, kayak pengen loncat gitu. Jadi saya punya cita-cita kalau suatu hari nanti pengen jalan-jalan, saya pengen loncat tebing yang terus naik parasut gitu. Jadi saya pengen ngerasain gitu. Terus saya juga punya cita-cita mendaki puncak-puncak gedung-gedung tertinggi di Jakarta gitu. Jadi ke rooftop ya, terus kayak foto-foto selfie gitu. Jadi saya suka ketinggian. Saya itu nggak tahu kenapa dari semester 1 sampai semester 4 tiap kali ujian tuh selalu sering salah masuk kelas. Jadi pernah pas lagi semester 1 atau semester 2 lupa gitu, itu saya ujian salah masuk kelas dan udah ngerjain soal. Salah masuk kelas, udah isi nama, udah ngerjain soal. Terus tiba-tiba yang duduk di tempat saya itu datang, nanya, "Loh, ngapain lo di sini?" Saya bilang, "Loh, ini kan tempat gua." Coba dicek lagi. Oh iya, ternyata saya salah kelas. Saya salah kelas, saya masuk kelas, dan ternyata kelas yang saya masukin salah juga yang kedua kali. Akhirnya di kelas ketiga saya baru benar. Jadi pengalaman uniknya itu, saya nggak tahu kenapa sering salah masuk kelas, terutama pas ujian. Pernah juga pas ujian PIA itu kan harus pakai well dress ya, harus pakai kemeja, celana bahan kan. Itu saya lupa dan pakai kaos nyampe di kampus. Jadi lucunya udah tinggal ujian 5 menit lagi, saya masih santai-santai, sosok belajar baca buku. Saya nggak ngeliatin teman-teman saya pakai baju rapi semua, sampai ada teman saya yang bilang, Yes, kok lu mau ujian PIA pakai kaos? Oh iya, saya baru ingat. Akhirnya langsung dari Kemanggisan naik ojek ke Baran Lama 10 menit, langsung ganti baju, balik lagi. Untungnya sih masih keburu gitu. Jadi ya itulah pengalaman uniknya. Susah juga ya supaya rajin kuliah, gimana ya? Tips khususnya, 1, bayar kuliah itu mahal, jadi jangan sia-siakan masuk kelas. Terus udah paling itu aja sih ya. Saya juga kadang masih suka males-males masuk kuliah, tergantung dosen sih. Kalau dosennya asik, masuk. Kalau agak-agak gimana, agak-agak males juga sih. Tapi buat motivasinya, sadarilah bahwa kuliah itu mahal. Rencana sih nggak kerja, rencana lulus kuliah tetap melanjutkan bisnis yang udah saya bangun dari SMA ini. Jadi nggak kepikiran untuk cari kerja sih, nggak kepikiran. Jadi rencananya habis lulus kuliah membesarkan bisnis ini, tapi rencana sih memang ada rencana mau ambil S2 juga gitu. Jadi habis lulus kuliah ambil S2 sambil membesarkan bisnis ini terus. Siapa tahu nanti ada anak BINUSian yang bisa join juga ya kan, jadi karyawan di sini. Moto hidup saya itu adalah menjadi tua itu pasti, menjadi dewasa itu pilihan, tapi jadi pengusaha itu keputusan. Never too young to become a billionaire. Lebih baik kita kehilangan masa muda daripada kita kehilangan masa depan kita. Jadikan masa muda kita itu produktif.
Introducing the Apple app of BINUS TV. Watch our live broadcast, view our videos on demand, check out our feature programs and show previews from news to talk show music to culinary reviews to tutorials. Get to know your favorite presenters from our feature programs. BINUS TV available on the App Store.
Apakah media sosial dapat menyatukan orang-orang? Sadarkah kita, saat kita membuka ponsel, di saat itulah kita menutup pintu? Lalu, di manakah rasa kebersamaan? Kini, Orang-orang merasa paling berbahagia saat mereka berbagi pengalaman di media sosial dan mendapat banyak likes. Benarkah teman-teman di media sosial itu ikut berbahagia? Media sosial telah dipenuhi oleh kepentingan pribadi, pencitraan, dan promosi diri, tanpa benar-benar menggunakan perasaan. Jadi, ketika kalian berada di tempat umum dan kalian merasa kesepian, angkat tanganmu dan jauhkan ponselmu. Buka matamu, lihat sekeliling, dan berbicaralah. Kembalikan kehidupan sosial antar manusia dan bukan antar ponsel.
Devanrel Eltisna Sumera lahir di Manado pada tanggal 6 September 1994. Para penawan yang akrab dipanggil Vanrel memiliki hobi menyanyi, bermain musik, menari, serta berperan. Dia mulai dikenal publik ketika menjadi Miss Earth Indonesia Ecotourism 2014 yang diadakan oleh Yayasan Ocean Pageants. Vanrel Sumera ternyata seorang BINUSian loh. Ia mengambil jurusan Marketing Communication di BINUS University. Yuk simak wawancaranya untuk mengenal BINUSian ini lebih dalam lagi.
Saat ini saya lagi sibuk kuliah tentunya, dan juga masih dalam kegiatan menjabat sebagai Miss Earth Indonesia Ecotourism 2014, dan bukan cuma ecotourism tapi saya juga Miss Earth Indonesia Favorite 2014. Selain itu juga saya sibuk pelayanan di gereja saya di Central Park GBI Nafiri Discipleship Church sebagai singer. Sementara itu saya juga lumayan sibuk sebagai presenter di Berita 1. Saat ini saya sementara berkuliah mengambil jurusan Marketing Communication dengan spesialisasi itu peminatan broadcasting. Banyak banget kuliah broadcasting, kirain salah jurusan ya, salah peminatan mungkin, tapi ternyata enggak. Banyak banget ilmu yang gue dapat sebagai seorang broadcaster. Ilmu yang paling ngena di hati adalah ilmu sebagai seorang jurnalis. Waktu itu ada dosen paling keren, dan itulah yang memberikan ilmu sebagai seorang jurnalis. Kalau jurnalis itu tidaklah mudah, karena kita sebagai seorang jurnalis harus memberikan berita yang faktual, bukan cuma sekedar mau diomongin oleh owner dari TV kita, tapi kita harus netral sebagai seorang jurnalis. Prospek kedepannya banyak sih ya sebenarnya. Ya karena gue jurusan yang Markom dan ambil broadcast, harusnya prospeknya tetap harus ke daerah broadcast di TV, radio, ataupun majalah. Ya pastinya karena mungkin gue ambil broadcast, kedepannya presenter TV ataupun news anchor. Anak BINUS kece-kece, jangan ditanya setiap kuesioner yang lu cari di website, pasti menyatakan 100% anak BINUS kece-kece. Kedua, kuliah di BINUS, lokasinya strategis, deket CL, deket CP, DTA, udah lah enak lah, daerahnya udah paling oke. Ketiga, kuliah di BINUS itu terkenal, jadi kalau udah lulusan BINUS kayak udahlah lumayan aman gitu loh, kemana-mana nggak usah takut. Keempat, kuliah di BINUS sistemnya teratur, ada BINUS Maya, lu nggak akan kesusahan cuman di BINUS doang yang mungkin punya BINUS Maya selengkap itu, yang punya jadwal, punya materi, dan apapun sampai kita semester akhir hanya ada di BINUS, yang nggak akan bisa lo temuin dimanapun. Kelima, hal yang paling menyenangkan di BINUS adalah dosen-dosennya asik-asik. Saya sangat suka menari. Paling utama menari tradisional, pemirsa. Kedua, saya suka semua genre musik. Mungkin orang kira Vanrel itu cuman suka nyanyi, soalnya background aku paduan suara, jadi mungkin lebih ke seriosa. But no, I love all genres of music. Ketiga, aku suka nggak tinggi-tinggi banget, cuman tinggi di foto mungkin ya, 170 doang kok pemirsa. Yang keempat, aku suka, hal yang paling menyenangkan di bumi ini menurut aku adalah tidur. Kelima, aku pernah bercita-cita menjadi seorang pendeta. Pengalaman paling lucu, yang paling oke, kayak tadi gue bilang, hal yang menyenangkan kuliah di BINUS itu dosennya asik banget. Ya kayak gue bilang, ada satu dosen di jurusan broadcast namanya Priza. Oh my god, dia sangat memberikan gue inspirasi karena tiap kali dia ngajar, dia selalu ngasih cerita-cerita fresh yang bikin kita bukan cuma sekedar belajar, tapi terdidik istilahnya. Karena cara dia ngemas pembelajarannya, tiap kali dia belajar sama dia nggak akan pernah terlupakan lah. Itu tiap momen-momen paling indah buat gue saat di kuliah, saat diajarin oleh seorang Priza. Kiat khusus mengatasi rasa kuliah. Lu ingat orang tua lu aja dah. Saat kita diam, kita ingat orang tua kita, itu yang memberikan kita kekuatan. Oke, gue harus tampil yang terbaik di kuliah karena ini buat masa depan keluarga gue. Gak ada talenta, kemampuan, atau bukan karisma yang bisa membuat lo tampil bersinar, ataupun lo bisa bersinar tapi gak bertahan lama kalau lo gak punya rasa kejujuran, integritas, dan karakter sebagai orang yang baik.
university, industry, school and media partner, high school student from BINUS and other schools, BINUSian leaders, educators and also students. I wish you all a very, very warm welcome. Indonesia is in a position to influence global decision making. The country is among the largest world economies. Its GDP has been growing between over the last couple of decades. The country is also a member of G20, ASEAN, and the Non-Aligned Movement. Jakarta and Palembang were the host to 2018 Asian Games, and the country spread over 5,000 kilometers between Southeast Asia mainland and Australia. The booming economic drive the need for skilled workers. It also generates the middle class. People are increasingly aware of their duties in sustainable development of the country and on the global stage. BINUS University responds to its demand by having a vision that is to foster and empower the society in building and serving the nation. Our university has developed a strong reputation among the global industry operating in Indonesia for relevant computer science, economic, and business education. Our students learn through case studies from Indonesia, ASEAN, and other parts of the world. This gave them a better understanding of the local and global interconnectedness. The initiative to host the esteemed Nobel Laureate, Professor Kydland, is also our effort to empower our students to understand what it takes for economic and sustainable development with the state-of-the-art knowledge. As from the speech today, quality and consistency in economic policy is closely linked to economic development. This is an important lesson to take for those who care about the advancement of our country, a better Indonesia. I sincerely hope that this extraordinary opportunity to speak to and learn from Prof. Kydland will inspire you. Students, fellow educators, researchers, and industry partners to keep co-creating the condition for Indonesia continuous prosperity. I herewith invite every one of us to always consider the big picture and impact of our activities on economic and sustainable development. I thank you, Professor Kydland, and the International Peace Foundation for this exceptional opportunity today. BINUS is proud to support the organization Bridges Dialogue Towards a Culture of Peace program, which aims to promote development, international cooperation, and peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Bapak Bernard Gunawan, for the warm welcome.
Welcome to the 7th ASEAN event series, Bridges, Dialogues Towards a Culture of Peace. Bridges is facilitated by the International Peace Foundation, a non-political and non-religious foundation under the patronage of 20 Nobel Peace Prize laureates based in Vienna. The events are hosted in cooperation with various local partners, including some of the country's major universities, and I would like to thank BINUS University for hosting our event today. Having started in November last year, Bridges will be continuously held in Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand and Laos until March, involving the participation of Nobel laureates for economics, physics, chemistry and medicine. The 7th ASEAN series of Bridges follows the series of over 700 Bridges events, which the International Peace Foundation has already hosted in many ASEAN countries since the year 2003, as an independent contribution to the Decade for Culture of Peace and Non-Violence, which was initiated and promoted by the United Nations General Assembly. 48 Nobel laureates, as well as 21 other keynote speakers and artists, including President Jose Manuel Barroso, Hans Blix, Chucky Chan, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, Vanessa May, Jesse Norman, President Romano Prodi, the late Dame Anita Roddick, Oliver Stone and James Wolfenson participated in these events. In Thailand, they were presided over by Her Majesty Queen Sirikit and Her Royal Highness Crown Princess Maha Chakri Sirinthorn, and reached an audience of 200,000 participants. As peace cannot be achieved instantly, but is a process which needs time, Bridges has not been organized as a single conference, but as an ongoing series of events in which Nobel laureates and international decision makers have built strong bridges with leaders in all parts of society and with the general public. With the basis for peace being education and synergies being the fruit of cooperation, the International Peace Foundation has not realized Bridges alone, but has carried out the program together with UNESCO and with 162 other national and international institutions, including 92 major universities and schools across the ASEAN region. A multidisciplinary and pluralistic approach of Bridges in Indonesia, Thailand, the Philippines, Malaysia, Cambodia, Vietnam, Singapore and Laos reflects that peace involves all parts of society. It involves awareness and social responsibility of politicians, the business community, scientists, artists and the media. And since peace within ourselves, our families and our environment starts in our minds and hearts, it involves every one of us. In this sense, Bridges challenges us to cross borders and to build bridges by listening and opening up to other viewpoints, by generating new thoughts, by developing innovative forms of cooperation, and by fulfilling the desire of everyone to get to know and to learn from each other. This can lead us to a world in which we will be able to understand each other and the complexities we face today in a new light. A globalized world needs broad strategies for change to secure a sustainable future for us and the next generations. So let us be inspired by the knowledge and the wisdom that Bridges continues to offer. An opportunity to get a more inclusive, interconnected and comprehensive view of ourselves and the world in which we live in, and which we are able to create anew constantly through dialogues towards a culture of peace which need the participation of everyone. I thank the 2004 Nobel Laureate for Economics, Professor Kydland, and his wife, Dr. Tonya Kydland, who have kindly agreed to come to Indonesia to support the events. And we now look forward to his speech and to his important contribution to build bridges. Welcome, Professor Kydland. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Mr. Laureate for your kind remarks. Moving forward in the agenda, we would like to introduce you to our moderator for today. Dr. Gatot Supriyanto is currently the Dean of Faculty of Economics and Communication of BINUS University. The faculty has 4 study programs: Accounting and Finance, Hotel Management, Tourism, and Communication Science, with more than 5,000 active students and 120 lecturers. Dr. Gatot holds a Bachelor of Economics degree from Gajah Mada University, Yogyakarta, with cum laude, and earned his master degree from Monash University, Australia, with Best Graduate Awards. He finished his PhD also from Monash University, Australia in 2017, with dissertation entitled CEO Power, Corporate Tax Avoidance and Tax Aggressiveness. Prior joining BINUS, Gatot had joined multinational organizations such as Ernst & Young, United Nations Development Program, and United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF. Please join me to welcome the moderator for today, Dr. Gatot Supriyanto.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. From those here in BINUS University auditoriums and others who also watch through BINUS TV live streaming, or those who through video conference from various BINUS campuses, JWC Senayan, Alam Sutra, Bekasi campus, Bandung, and also Malang. And also from the participant from webinar program who has been broadcasted by the Knowledge Management Innovation Directorate. We do really appreciate your attendance as well as your participation in this event, despite the fact that actually today is what we call as Hari Kejepit Nasional or National Staff Days. So much really appreciated your participation today. Certainly it is a great pleasure for me to be the moderator from this wonderful event, and please allow me to briefly introduce our distinguished guest today. Professor Finn Erling Kydland is an economist born in Norway. He studied at the Norwegian School of Economics at Carnegie Mellon University, Pittsburgh, USA, where he later joined the Tepper School of Business. In 2004, he was appointed as the chair in economics at the University of California, Santa Barbara. He shared the 2004 Nobel Prize for Economics with Professor Edward C. Prescott for their contribution to dynamic microeconomics, specifically the time consistency of economic policy and the driving forces behind business cycle. Professor Kydland and Professor Prescott influenced the monetary and fiscal policies of government and laid the basis for the increased independence of many central banks, notably those in the United Kingdom, Sweden, and New Zealand. The pair demonstrated the technology changes or supply shocks, such as oil price hikes, could be reflected in investment and relative price movement and thereby create short-term fluctuation around the long-term economic growth path. Today, Professor Finn will discuss in the topic around the consistent economic policy and economic development. He will deliver the speech for around 45 minutes, and then we can proceed with a question and answer session for about 45 minutes as well. Without further ado, please join me to welcome Professor Finn Kydland.
Dear faculty, dear students, dear students who may be watching or listening from near and far at our other campuses, it's a great pleasure again to be involved with the Bridges program for the third time actually. About a dozen years ago, we were in Thailand and the Philippines hosted by Bridges, International Peace Foundation, and then about 3 years ago in North Korea. I'm a Norwegian, and whenever there's talk of peace, Norwegians always jump right in. As is evident by the fact that the Peace Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize, it's decided in Norway, in Oslo, and Norwegians have traditionally gone to various parts of the world to participate in peace processes. I might mention also in Norway they took initiative to an award called the Oslo Business for Peace Award. I've been a member of the selection committee for about half a dozen years. So I thank Uwe Moravec for inviting me again. Thank you very much. So, as was mentioned, my name has been associated with business cycle theory in some way through my research. But by and large, I regard the business cycle, even though it's interesting and important to understand, the long run of economies are more important for the long run welfare of a nation's citizens. So, at least in the beginning, I would like to talk some on the long run development. And let me just test out that I know how to. Yeah, very good. So this is a chart that depicts the long run movement, or the movement of 3 economies from 1947 until close to the present. These are pictures of real GDP. In other words, the amount of goods and services produced in the economy. It's in real terms, in the sense that they've all been inflation adjusted, and as we say, they've been purchasing power parity adjusted. In other words, the numbers have been adjusted, taking into account how cheaply or expensive it is to live in those countries. So these I would regard as benchmark economies. They suggest how well a well-functioning economy can do. There's the blue one, United States, then there's Canada and Australia. Now, one thing that's interesting to researchers is how different various parts of the world have done in producing GDP. And so now I'd like to add 2 groups of countries, 2 groups of 3 countries each, and they're spectacularly different. One is a collection of East Asian countries. These are Japan, Korea, and Hong Kong, if I may call Hong Kong a country. These got a much lower start than the top countries, but they've done very well, maybe with the exception of Japan, that has slowed down notably since about 1990. Then I would like to add 3 Latin American countries. Latin American countries are notorious for doing much more poorly. These curves are well below, and they are not growing very much. These are Chile, Argentina, and Mexico, and I could have picked almost any country in Latin America, and they wouldn't have done well in this picture. And so this sort of thing leads you to ask, what is it about these countries that makes them so different? Is it about their institutions? Is it something about the political system? What could it be? And that's among the things that are important to try to understand and to learn from. Sometimes you get a late start as a country. In this case, I've had Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan. They got a late start because they came about after the breakup of the Soviet Union around 1990. These two countries had a hard time initially. As you can see, maybe the adjustment to more towards market economies from the old Soviet style took their toll. But starting about 2000, they have done spectacularly well. They are resource-rich countries, that helps, but not all resource-rich countries know how to manage their wealth or their resources. These two countries evidently do. I've been to both countries to conferences, including 4 times to Kazakhstan, to the Astana Economic Forum. The last time I had the chance to talk to government officials, and they said, they told me that we've been so successful, now it's getting hard. It's been hard to find qualified people to keep the growth momentum going. Now, I must say that's a benign problem to have. It suggests they've already been very successful, and they are taking the consequences and trying to educate the local population as well as they can by expanding existing universities, creating at least 2 new universities. That's exactly what a country in that situation should do. This is a good time, by the way, to remind you, the picture is in absolute terms. It's designed so that we can, looking at the levels of various countries gives us the message we're interested in. So there's not so much about how fast the economies grow, although we can obviously tell the difference between how much better the 3 East Asian countries have been doing compared to the Latin American countries. But let me just remind you that the slope of a curve far down in the picture, because this is not on proportional scale, the slope of a curve such as this one or this one far down in the picture corresponds to a much higher annual growth rate than the same slope high up in the picture. Now, there is one more country I would like to include, and that is China. So that's the gray curve at the very bottom. China has been projected to become the largest country in the world in terms of total economic activity. It is projected to overtake the United States in that respect. And so many are surprised to see this picture and see how low China is in per capita term. So output per person has been quite low, and I suppose it's an example of, if you multiply a very small number with a huge number, over 1 billion people, you can still get a big number. Now, let me show you one more picture, and that's a sad picture. So this is, all of these countries are doing reasonably well. Make a note or pay attention to the scale. So this goes from 0 to $50,000 in constant 2005 US dollars. This next picture has a scale that goes only from 0 to 10,000. So it's like I could have fit, if I put them in this picture, they would all fit at the very bottom here. But it's interesting to look at them in a way that makes it easier to separate them. And so this is from 0 to 10,000, as I said. And these are countries like Lesotho, Chad, Cameroon, the two Congos, Kenya, Libya, Nigeria, Angola, and Botswana. So Botswana is the only reason I needed 0 to 10,000, because as you can see, otherwise I could have gotten by with 0 to 5,000. But Botswana, by sub-Saharan standards, it's a fairly resource-rich country. They have diamonds, they have other minerals, and by African standards, they've done a good job managing their resources. But the bottom of this picture, or this graph, story. Many of these countries are under $1,000 per person, and here the question is even more pressing. Why are they doing so poorly, and what is it about these countries? Is it about, well, we probably all know there are many African countries with a lot of corruption. They don't exactly generate the greatest amount of trust in terms of, suppose I were to set up a factory in that country, or develop some productive capacity, would I be able to hang on to that factory? Would the government try to take it over? All kinds of difficulties. Now, I know I'm talking to faculty and students, and so there's no way I as a professor, I can give a talk without at least one equation, right? Okay, I'll give you a simple one. This is the only one I'll use. And this is a very important one because it's central to all of modern macroeconomic models. It's an equation that describes how much output of goods and services is produced in any nation of the world. So this says that real GDP, again, inflation adjusted, real GDP is a function of 3 factors. And that's why I show it, because it gives me an excuse to talk about those 3 important factors. And the symbols are Z, K, and L. It says that it's a function of, the Z is the technology levels. So it's an indication of the extent to which productivity in a nation changes over time or grows over time, preferably, but also a function of the interaction of the capital stock with the labor input. So the capital stock is the sum of all the factories and machines and office buildings in the nation. L is the labor input. So we all understand that workers interact with machines and inside a factory, and that's what produces output. In practice, in an economic model, this F function would have a particular mathematical form that fits well with the data. Now, I could have put the Z inside the F function as well, but the way I put it is meant to emphasize how hugely important the Z is. So Z is as I said, a measure of the technology level in a country. The technology level comes about through decisions of thousands of businesses in their activities, such as research and development, sometimes helped by governments to support research through, let's say, National Science Foundation or something like that, but most of it through businesses. What this particular form of writing it emphasizes is how powerful the Z is. In the data suggests that output, that the technology level moves, or output is essentially proportional to the technology level. If there's a 1% increase in the technology level, even if K and L were to keep constant or roughly constant, 1% increase in the technology level, output would go up by 1%. And that's a very powerful thing, very powerful. It shows Z as basically the key driver of economic growth. Economic growth, said roughly in words, there's technological change, capital gets built to take advantage of it, workers are hired, incomes, the workers are paid incomes, blah, blah, blah. That's how both output and incomes grow. So Z, hugely important. Now, so that's one thing about this equation. The other is to point out that these decisions I mentioned, those that go into making the technology grow, research and development, development of new products, development of new ways of making things, and the decisions about new productive capacity, building new factories, installing machines, building office buildings. They're very forward-looking decisions. They tend to be decisions that cost a lot as they take place. They could cost millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. It may take a year or two for the decisions to be for everything to be finished, and then they start earning income through, in the case of capital or factories, through selling the products made in by those machines or factories. Now, and those returns come over many years into the future, for the lifetime of those factories or machines. Now, one thing that's so then we have in making those decisions, businesses must weigh, should I incur this tremendous cost of building a factory or building an office building against the sum, and in economics we would say the discounted sum of future returns. That's the kind of decision one would have to think about, and it'd be good if the more accurately you can make the estimate of those future returns, the better it would be. Now, here's a problem. Those future returns are affected by government policy. So this is where government policy comes into the picture for the first time in my talk, and I'm going to talk some more about the role of government policy. Because it's not the gross returns, it's the after-tax returns that matter. Now, if I decide or I contemplate building a factory in 2019, do I know what the tax rates will be, let's say in 2025 or 2030? Well, you don't know exactly, but you have an expectation that typically will be based on your trust in your own government, that they will behave reasonably. They won't, after you finish the factory, they won't turn around and suddenly tax it, double the taxes of the income from the factory. You need a trust in your government. There is a reason not to have that trust, and that is because of the finding that the optimal tax, the optimal policy, the optimal tax policy is time inconsistent. That was one thing that Prescott and I discovered. There will always be a temptation. If there's no commitment, if there's no commitment mechanism to make sure they stick to their promised policy, there will always be a temptation for them to turn around and change the policy in a way that seems like a good idea to them in the short run, but it turns out if they do that, especially over and over again, it can be very bad for society. And this all has to do with the fact that current decisions about Z, current decisions about K, they are forward-looking. They depend on the expectation of future policy. Future policy affects their decisions today, but when that future comes around and today is already history, the government will have a temptation to change their mind towards something that seems a good idea to them in a very short run. Now, I mentioned that there's a need for a commitment mechanism, and now, in government policy, we divide government policy into two kinds, basically, and that is monetary policy, about how fast to print new money, or how fast the inflation rate is going to be, on the one hand, and on the other, fiscal policy about what I already mentioned, current and future taxes, current and future government spending, what to do about maybe as part of the government budget, what will happen to government debt, and so on. That's fiscal policy. Now, in terms of commitment mechanism, we have discovered a way to introduce such a way to commit in monetary policy, and that is to make the central bank independent from political pressure. And that's something that, well, some countries have done a good job in that respect, other countries, terrible job. In the olden days, Germany was the master of consistent, transparent monetary policy, and the United States is up there, and so are the Scandinavian countries, New Zealand, and a few countries, but there are countries doing a terrible job, and here's where Latin America is especially bad. Country after country in Latin America experienced suddenly extreme rises in the inflation rate, hyperinflations as we call it. When there's a hyperinflation, the poor people who are sitting, maybe they're retired people or whatever, they're holding government bonds, and suddenly the value of those government bonds shrink to virtually zero. So it's a bad thing for societies. Now, so there is a solution in the monetary arena, but in the fiscal arena, it's much harder to see how one could commit to good fiscal policy for the long run. I do have one example of a country that did so, and I'd like to show you that country. And I regard that country, what they did, as something that other countries should aspire to. But it's hard to see that many would be able to do so, in part because they have already lost much of their trust. If certain countries try to repeat what I'm about to show you, investors would just go, ha ha, that's a good one. And then, now, leading up to that example, let me show a picture, similar picture, but this is from Europe. And these are major European countries: United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Austria. And then I'll throw into this picture 3 more countries that haven't done quite as well. Oh, good. So these here I've added Spain, Italy, and Greece. Actually, Italy for a while was pretty good at keeping up with the top countries, but they have really faltered lately. And Greece and Italy clearly, Greece and Spain clearly well below. And I'll throw in one more country. So here's in the group towards the bottom, here's Ireland. The brownish curve that is on top of Spain, and it ends in 1990. Why does it end in 1990? Well, I want to tell you about Ireland in 1990. Politicians in Ireland decided, we will make tax policy completely certain. They told potential investors in productive capacity, they said, if you, whether you're a foreign company or a domestic country, if you set up shop in Ireland, these will be your tax rates, not just in 92, 93, and so on, but all the way to 2009. More than the lifetime of a typical capital project. And by the way, these were not high taxes, of course. And I'm not saying that this was the only thing that happened and the only factor that made a difference, but this had a spectacular effect. So here is the continuation of that curve I showed you that currently stops in 1990. Within 10 years, Ireland had overtaken the top 4 countries in this picture. Just a spectacular behavior. They were sometimes referred to as the Celtic Tiger because of their great performance. Now, it is true that Ireland could have done even better. I mean, what the government did in around 1990, a great thing. One thing they missed out on was sufficient regulation of the banking system. And so as we got into the 2000s, 2005, 2006, and so on, Irish banks started giving loans to for construction purposes, for various purposes that turned out not to be a good idea. And when the financial crisis hit in the rest of the world, 4 major banks in Ireland were insolvent. The government decided to step in and bail them out at tremendous cost to the taxpayer. The debt to GDP ratio went up, pretty much doubled from about 1/2 to 3/4 up to about 1.5. This did have a temporary cooling down effect on the Irish economy. To the extent that when the financial crisis hit and Greece went bankrupt, journalists and others started talking about potential future problem countries. Typically, they would mention Spain, Italy, Portugal, and Ireland. At some point, I was curious. This was after 2008. I was curious to see how poorly Ireland really did after the financial crisis. Was there a reason for anyone to be worried about them in the long run? And so I took a look at pictures of Z. This is Z in the production function. We call it total factor productivity. So that's the official name for Z, total factor productivity. These pictures are for these potential future problem countries. Spain in the upper left-hand corner, then Italy, then in the lower left-hand corner, Portugal, and then Ireland. And these go back to 1960, when the data series start. The straight lines represent the average growth from 1960 to 1990, and then extended to the present. Now, I intended to look at those pictures to see primarily how Ireland was doing in that context of naming them as a potential future problem countries. Little did I expect what I ended up seeing. These are among the most shocking pictures I've ever seen, because they say that in 3 of those 4 countries, productivity came to a full stop starting in the early to mid 1990s. That's shocking because of how important the Z is in the production function. If Z stops growing, big trouble. No country can grow in terms of welfare per citizen without in that kind of situation. Full stop in productivity. There is another way to look at productivity, and that is to calculate the amount of output per hour worked. And I'm sorry, I put a wrong button. Amount of output per hour worked, but that tells the same story. Full stop in productivity after beginning to mid 90s. One thing I found interesting to do is compare Ireland to these other 3 countries. So because this is output per hour worked, the countries can be compared. The TFP they're just indices, so it's hard to compare them with other nations. But here we can compare Ireland with these other 3 countries. And it turns out, even with a little bit of slowdown in Ireland, a little bit of slowdown, as you can see after the financial crisis in Ireland, Ireland is still 40 to 50% higher than these other 3 countries. 40 to 50% higher. So this tells me that unless Ireland does something really stupid, from perspective of policy or whatever, they are likely to be in good shape in the long run. Now, you may ask why this happened, and I will skip a couple of pictures, but let me just show this picture, which is quite revealing. Economic activity in a nation, this is for Spain, can be divided into producing 2 types of goods: tradable goods and non-tradable goods. Tradable goods are goods that much of them are sold domestically, but by their nature, they can be shipped to other countries. They can be exported. So they're tradable goods. Non-tradable goods, by their nature, they cannot be traded with other countries. Construction projects, for example, a haircut is a non-tradable good. In Spain, until 1990, the economy was divided about half and half in terms of tradable versus non-tradable. But then it started diverging. And as you can see, by 2010, 2/3 of economic activity was in the form of producing non-tradable and 1/3 tradable. And it turns out, and these are two pictures I'll skip but in the interest of time, but the pictures show that in the tradable goods sector, productivity continued to rise by 2 to 3% annual growth. In the non-tradable goods sector, only by less than 1/3% growth per year. In other words, there was a major switch for reason I won't have time to go into, from tradable goods to non-tradable goods production. It turns out this was an unintended and unexpected effect of the announcement of joining the Eurozone back in around 1990, and economic theory is perfectly consistent with economic theory, and but I'll leave it at that. I did promise to say a few words about the business cycle, and I'll do so in the context of the United States. So this is a picture of real GDP per capita for the United States going back to 1947, when quarterly data started being collected. The straight line, this isn't on proportional scale, so that the straight line corresponds to a constant annual growth rate. And the straight line works pretty well. You could think of that as the trend of the US economy. There are the actual series, the fully drawn series. It fluctuates around the long run trend. Those fluctuations are what we call the business cycle. And as you can see, there are periods where GDP per capita decline. Here we have a major one from 1978 roughly to 82. It doesn't look like such a big deal in that picture, but I assure you it was a big deal when it happened. You might ask, how far below the trend did GDP drop in 82 at the bottom of that period? And the answer is about 5%. So back in those days, 5% drop below that trend, that was a major recession. But look at the recent one, which the one after the financial crisis, the one that bottomed in 2008, 2009, huge decline by historical standards. And a very different one, because in the previous, after the previous recessions, typically once the economy started rebounding, it started rebounding fairly quickly. It turns out the recession in 2008, 2009 was largely investment driven. Consumption held up surprisingly well, a very unusual recession. And the economy never showed any inclination of trying to move back towards the old trend line. Just to get a better idea of what happened at the very end, here's the end of that picture blown up so we can see it more clearly. So this decline below this fully drawn curve around 2008, 2009, 12%. 12%. And it's spectacular that while there is some growth no attempt even to go back to growing as fast as the old trend, or even as in after previous recessions, to move back to that line. It turns out much of it probably had to do with the expectation of future economic policy after the Great Recession, after the government debt to GDP ratio shot up to levels not seen since World War II, and worry about what kind of policies were likely to be carried out after that period. Again, I'll just at this point I'll just indicate to you that's a very important phenomenon. Another example where either the actual government policy or the expectation of what it might be in the future plays a big role. And then let me just see if I have time. How long have I been going? Tanya? I'm trying to see if I have time for my very last point, which has to do with China, but I could stop here. Pardon? 5 minutes, okay. 5 minutes, perfect. So I mentioned the principle that optimal government policy is time inconsistent, and there's a need for a commitment mechanism to make sure that people trust economic actors, businesses, households, trust what economic policy has been promised and going forward, because that affects what they do today. Now, so the principle is about the time inconsistency of optimal government policy. It is important to realize that ideally then there will be a consistent policy that everyone trusts, a consistent, when I say optimal, I would translate into common English as good economic policy. But it is important to realize consistent policy is not sufficient for good outcomes. It's not sufficient. There could be consistent policy, but it could be consistent and bad policy. And to me, China is an example of policy as consistent as they come, but bad policy. Now, so this illustrates what's bad about China, even though it says it's a picture of Chile versus Mexico. One of the best ways to learn something very powerful in economics is when we run across a case where two countries were in a similar situation, maybe in a bad situation, they took different policy measures, and then we observe what happens. And this is an example. In 1981, Chile and Mexico found themselves in the same situation. They were the prices of their main products, petroleum in the case of Mexico, and copper in the case of Chile, the prices were unusually low. Interest rates were in the world were very high. In Chile, for example, banks accounting for 1/2 of the nation's deposits were insolvent. The government stepped in. They decided which banks were viable for the long run. The others, they just let go under. Now, the viable ones, the government took over, but within 3 years, they had they decided to reprivatize the insolvent banks, now supported by the government at first, but then making them private again. So when the banking system started functioning again, market interest rates started being quoted. The banks provided loans to good projects, the way a good, well-functioning banking system can do. And the economy started growing again. It did come with a big initial cost. During the period when the banks weren't functioning well, as you can see in this picture, the Chilean economy, the blue curve, declined by about 20% in the first 2 years. Economic activity declined by 20% in the first 2 years, but then Chile started growing. Presumably Mexico was reluctant. They were worried about this short-run cost of an initial decline, and so they had the bureaucrats of Mexico took over the banks. They never reprivatized them, certainly at least not within the first 20 or 25 years. So bureaucrats were in charge of, you get a loan, but you don't get a loan, and evidently they did not do a good job, as you would expect. You would think that bureaucrats would be the last to know which are good economic projects and which aren't. And so it took more than 20 years for Mexico to get back even where they were in '81. This is a very powerful example, and why is it interesting having to do with China? Well, China, to me, is much closer to Mexico than to Chile in this picture. In China, the main banks are state-run, equivalent to the bureaucrats running the banks in Mexico. They're state-run. They tend to favor the big state-run companies, which, because of their easy access to loan, they don't have much incentive to work to make their companies more and more productive. As a consequence, in the meantime, the key drivers of economic growth in a well-functioning economy, the entrepreneurs, the new entrepreneurs, those with big ideas that they would like to put to fruition, small to medium-sized companies have a hard time getting loans to fund their activities. As a consequence, there's a huge amount of resource misallocation. Resources that could have been allocated to these small to mid-sized companies, but they're not. In the meantime, they're wasted with companies that turn out not to be very productive. There's an article in American Economic Review called Growing Like China, which tries to quantify the extent of this resource misallocation by the three authors Song, Storsletten, and Silly Botti. The extent of resource misallocation is staggering. And what it really means is that even though China has grown at rates that some people find reasonably impressive, like 6, 7, 8% a year, it turns out China, with a more sensible way of a financial system, could have the same amount of resources, same amount of metal, same amount of human capital, even the same amount of resources could have been supported growth in China at much higher rates. this is also consistent with findings in another article recently published by 3 authors, Hal Cole, Jeremy Greenwood, and Juan Sanchez, an article in Econometrica entitled, "Why Doesn't Productivity Flow from Rich to Poor Countries?" And that has to be one of the most important questions in the world today. They also support the idea that much of it has to do with how well developed the financial sector is. In countries with a well-developed financial sector, it's easier for productivity, new knowledge, maybe from the rest of the world, adapted to local conditions, can be put to productive use. If the financial system is not well developed, much, much harder to do. So, to finish, do I have a final message of my talk, which emphasized the role of what the government does, what the institutions government tries to put in place, the long-run policy, the importance of the expectation of future policy for what businesses and households do today? Well, it's obvious that the more certain you are about these future policies, the easier it is to make good economic decisions that will make the country grow, will make welfare increase in the nation. So I suppose my final conclusion could be there is enough uncertainty in the world as is. We don't need more coming from the government. Thank you very much for listening.
All right, so thank you, Professor Finn, for the eye-opener of the presentation today. So if I can summarize, so while the audience here in the auditorium preparing the questions, and I believe from the online viewers, I think we have more than 100 questions from the online viewers. So what I can...
So one answer every half minute? Is that
that's quite a challenge, but again, as you said, that's technology, right, that can drive us to get a lot of questions like this. So if I can summarize, one of the key points discussion that Prof Finn already put out is first, he put some GDP as the measure of economic development. That's the first story of the comparison of the country in I think in the Europe, Africa, as well as some country in Asia. And he also put up a model where, or equations where we have 3 main factors that can affect GDP. And the first one is Z, which is what we call the level of productivity, including the technology. We have K, which is the capital, and also L is the labor. On those 3 model in the equations, government policy will have a significant influence, especially on the Z one. On how it can improve the level of investment in technology, for example. And number 4, I think Professor Finn already gave an example how Ireland put a consistent economic policy until the banking crisis in 2008. And I think Professor Finn also have the final message that, well, in the world nowadays, we have enough uncertainty. And with that in mind, government should also propose or formulate a more certain economic policy to fight those uncertainty. I will invite 3 questions on the first batch in this auditoriums. I'll start with this side. Okay, that's question number 1. We have 2. Yes, Miss Effie, I think, sorry, we get 2 ladies already. And I think we have 1 question from BINUS School. You come along from Serpong, right? So I think it's a great opportunity for you to raise a question. So we have 1. So in total, we have 3 questions. I think we can start with Ibu first. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Finland. At last, nice to meet you. My name is Vulan from BINUS Business Schools, and I have few questions for you. How do you predict Indonesian economic development and the challenges we will face? And among Asian countries, Indonesia well known of the big kids on the block. How do you compare our economic to other Asian countries? And in relation to China, it seems that Asian countries are being pulled into 2 directions, whether we have to choose China or America. And what is the significant roles of Indo-Pacific region for Indonesia? Thank you.
Thank you, Bu Wulan. So you have 3 questions over there. I can summarize the question later on. Thank you. Question number 2. Yep.
Thank you. Hi, Professor Kydland. I'm Evi Stiliana. I'm the faculty of Accounting Department. I'm also the consultant for public-private partnership for the government of Indonesia on infrastructure project. So my questions were related to the infrastructure development. As we know all that Indonesia now entering the extremely the change on the period related to the infrastructure development, and the expectation of the developing itself is the increasing of GDP and the economic growth. What is your view to see Indonesia in the stage of in this infrastructure development? What are the success factor or the consider major factor to boost economic growth for Indonesia other than government policies? And the second one, you mentioned before that the good consistent policy which implied the good outcome. Can you give, you had given us the example, but maybe also can you give a view on the good consistent policy which implied to the good outcome for Indonesia itself? Thank you. That's my questions.
Thank you, Ibu Evi. Give a round of applause for Ibu Evi. And last but not least.
Hi, so you talk a lot about consistency, but I just
your name, please? Sorry.
So you talk a lot about consistency.
I mean your name.
Oh, my name.
Nama.
Hi, I'm Mutiara. I'm from BINUS School Serpong. So, sir, you talk a lot about consistency of the central banks, but what do you think about flexibility? Like, to what extent should central banks be flexible? When do you know when to interfere with long-term continuity of policies? Thank you.
Thank you, Mutiara. Let's give a round of applause for Mutiara. So, right, in total we have around 6 questions from 3 participants. First one from Wulan. So the question is, how do you see or predict economic development, and what is the main challenges for economic development? So that's the first question. The second one is, how is Indonesian economic performance compared to the other competitors in Asia? And the third question, basically the world can be divided into 2 major economic players nowadays, China and US. And if Indonesia have to choose either way, which one is the best one? So that's those 3 questions. Professor, please.
Yeah, I was thinking of that last one. How do you choose the best of 2 ills? Now, I don't really think you need to choose one or the other. That's a hypothetical situation. I mean, I can sort of see where you're coming from, but it's a hypothetical situation in which you never need to put yourself. I suppose you can, I guess what's meant is you try to gear yourself more in one direction, not completely in one or the other. And it is a problem with the United States these days that the current government has made themselves less trustworthy and also at the same time less predictable. And that is a... Oh. My own? Oh, fantastic. That is a problem. So I didn't mention this in my talk, but going back as far as 3 or 4 years ago, well before the Trump administration took power, for other reasons, I had started in my keynotes in illustrating what it meant to have good long-run policy and examples of not so good short-term oriented policy. That when consistency or the adherence to good long-run economic policy breaks down, it starts looking like policy is very short-run oriented. If you follow politics or economics, you'll recognize Argentina as an example of the latter, and not just Argentina, but many Latin American countries, maybe with the exception of Chile, where policy is very short-run oriented. And so, for someone who understands the principle of timing consistency of optimal government policy, it's an easy prediction was, as I started doing back then when it was clear that some countries were struggling, my prediction was that we would start to see more tariff restrictions or trade restrictions raise their ugly head. It's an easy prediction because that's what you tended to see in Latin America over and over again. And it seemed that the environment in many countries was such that that would be what politicians would be tempted to do. So, I suppose I could pride myself in making that prediction, but I admit, I did not predict that the impetus, the initiative to get trade restrictions started would come from the United States. That was a big surprise to me. Now, whether the political environment, comparing the United States to China, whether the political environment in the United States will remain the way it's been for the past couple of years, that's anybody's guess, I suppose. I would, to give an indication of what you would like to strive for, I would like to mention Scandinavia as an example of, now that we've seen the United States and how very confrontational politics are, how big the differences are, whether it seems to be when Republicans are more in power or Democrats. In a country like Norway, for example, my home country, you don't see that. We see governments changing from the Labour Party to a coalition of center to right parties, or back, 4 8-year periods maybe. You hardly notice a difference. So in Norway, there's much more agreement about economic policy. There's much more certainty. No one gets really surprised when one government takes over from the other. There's a great deal of trust that there will be reasonable policy. But how do you export that valuable commodity to other countries, such as the United States or China? It's a tough question. Let's see. Which question should I answer now?
How is Indonesian performance economically?
Oh, Indonesian. Okay, so you're asking a question. I am a professor, and I take pride in not answering questions whose answer I don't know. there are many economists who, to draw attention to themselves in front of journalists or whatever, are willing to answer questions whose answer they don't know. I'm not one of them. And so you're asking an interesting question. I would like to take a few days to do some research. But right here, that's infeasible. Now the one thing I would say, so you asked about where do I predict, what do I predict about the Indonesian economy? And I sometimes get that kind of question. So you saw the picture for the business cycle for the United States, and I have a well-known paper where Prescott and I proposed a new way of approaching business cycle theory, being explicit about the dynamic decision problems faced by households and businesses, and in a way that you can calibrate quantify the parameters with great deal of confidence and so on. The first question to which we put that theory to use was to ask the question, if the ebb and flow of technological change, in other words, if shocks to the technology level, shocks to the Z kind of, if that were the only source of fluctuations, how much of the business cycle would still have remained? And the model gave an answer. It gave a quantitative answer. The first version gave an answer of about half, but then as the model was refined, maybe 2/3. Now, these shocks to the technology level that created this impulse to make the economy move, you could estimate them statistically. And it turns out, if you do, the shocks move more or less very close to what in statistics is called random walk. And random walk, essentially by definition, random walk is unpredictable. So if I, having proposed a theory where the main impulse was something that moves like a random walk, if at the same time I turned around and pretended I can predict what's going to happen in the next year or two, I would look completely ridiculous. So I'm not going to try to predict where the Indonesian economy is going to go. But let me just say that I know at least one of the things on which it will depend, and I'm more interested in what's going to happen in the next 10 years than simply in the next 1 or 2 years. And it's going to... I didn't do that. It's going to depend in large part on the Z, the productivity movement. To what extent can Indonesia learn from knowledge that's readily available in basically all over the world, but presumably adjust to local conditions? That's going to be a big factor. And now I remember there was a question about infrastructure. Infrastructure is part of the development of infrastructure, is part of economic policy. It's paid for typically through the government budget constraint. So that makes it a political decision. Infrastructure is something that contributes to making an economy more productive. So you could say that, in a sense, more infrastructure is going to make it possible for the Z to grow, and of course, as a consequence, it will have all the good effects on the capital and the growth of the economy as a whole. And while I have the word here, let me just say that one of the things, given I'm in an educational institution, one of the things I did not have time to talk about is long-run aspects of L, the labor input. You might think that L is just the size of the working age population in a nation. Well, that is not true. So you might worry, these days in many nations, L is not growing at all. Does that mean that output is not going to be growing? It doesn't mean that at all. Because in a well-functioning economy, L should be growing faster than the working age population. And the reason for that is workers become better and better at doing what they are doing in the market sector. They become more highly educated. What you students here and on other campuses are doing, that's going to be very valuable to the nation in terms of productive ability to contribute to GDP, and presumably decisions about that. That's what we call. We're weighting the labor input by its human capital. To speak technically, human capital. Through more education, through learning by doing. Workers learn by doing. They become better at doing what they do over time, and so on. And so, but there is a problem, and that is that the age distribution is going, in many countries, is going against workers contributing as much as they used to, and if anyone is interested in that question, that could be a question someone could ask, but I'll just stop here.
Right, thank you, Prof. Very diplomatic answers in a way that you say that you need more time to answer some of the questions, especially related to the predictions of Indonesian economic performance and so on, right? In the question from Ibu Evi about the infrastructure, I think you already highlighted that's important. Have some economic consequences as well, but another input such as labor inputs, such as us inside these auditoriums, also very important, especially in terms of the higher education as well, right? Now we have a question from Ibu Evi. It's related the example of good and consistent economic policy, Professor. Probably that's the one that you can give us example. The example of good consistent economic policy.
Well, that's the best example I can think of, given where I am, is what the Indonesian, what Bank of Indonesia is doing in the arena of monetary policy. So I was extremely impressed today. I was invited to a conference in Bali by the Bank of Indonesia in 2005. I met many of the researchers in the Bank of Indonesia, and I got to give a keynote speech at that conference and so on. And of course I talked about the importance of well understood, transparent and consistent over time monetary policy. Today, I kind of got the follow-up in terms of what Bank of Indonesia has done. And they clearly took great pride in pointing out that they have followed the prescription that and then adherent to optimal monetary policy would indicate. And so I mean, it was wonderful to me to hear, because I love hearing success stories. Sometimes I tell horror stories to warn people against bad things, but it's wonderful to hear success stories. That's one of the reasons I like the example of Ireland. But to hear the success story of the Bank of Indonesia was, to me, was tremendous. And so I think of that as a good example.
So we can use the example of the monetary policies of Bank of Indonesia as a good and consistent economic policies in Indonesia. Right. The final question from Mutiara from BINUS School is that, right, consistent economic policy is important. How about flexibility, especially flexibility in the context of central bank policy? That's
bad idea. So when people start talking about flexibility, usually they're thinking of what. The article that you keep referring to, the time and consistency of government plans, I guess that was called. It did have 4 words in front of the colon in front of that title, and those words were rules rather than discretion. And so it's also a recommendation, strong recommendation in favor of using rules that people understand. They're consistent over time. Discretion means that, well, you look what's happening and then you adjust monetary policy, and then which sounds to me like what someone might mean when they say flexibility. Well, bad idea.
Okay. So that's the answer, Mutiara. Unfortunately, it's a bad idea, especially for central bank like Bank of Indonesia. So it's better to have rules rather than discretions. Right.
I mean, it is, discretion is something that you respond to something in the short run, and so if you want to see what happens under discretion, take a look at Argentina. Argentina is well, I'm sure you can find even worse examples, but Argentina happens to be a country that, I mean, I visited there 10 years in a row to give an intensive course, so I learned to know Argentina very well. I have done research, written 3 or 4 papers with an Argentine economist. He's at the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. I know Argentina well, and I follow Argentina, but Argentina in terms of, and it's a fantastic country, with great potential, great resources, educated people, and so on, but bad policy, and so over and over again you see them reacting in a very short-run manner. That's how discretion shows up. It's responding to very short-run things the politicians see, such as Trump responding to his observing that something about the trade deficit or something like that, and not realizing it's very natural for trade deficits. even in good situations to be negative. And then, I mean, for example, for a long time there was worried about the U.S. trade deficit versus Japan. But when you look at the evolvement of demographic structures in the two countries, it's easy to see that's exactly what you would anticipate, that for a long time U.S. would have a trade deficit versus Japan, but then at a certain time, let's say in 2015, it would turn around, and then it would turn the other way, and that's a good thing. And trying to prevent it, it would be very bad.
Okay, thanks for the example on that to explain the point, Prof. Unfortunately, audience, we are running out of time, and we can only entertain one online question, Professor. That's in the screen right now. That's basically, dear Prof, kindly explain what are the main agendas that should be pursued by nations such as Indonesia to promote consistent economic growth in current digital era. So the combination nowadays is more on digital era situations. So what is the consistent economic policy to promote consistent economic growth?
In the digital
era right now, when you know.
You're asking the wrong person. So I just, for 8 years, I had a Nokia flip phone, which after about 5 years, the battery cover fell off, but fortunately there's a great invention called duct tape. And so the battery cover was, for 3 years, it was covered by duct tape, but finally it conked out completely a few months ago. So fortunately, I was able to go to Verizon and purchase another flip phone.
Flip phone, okay.
I refuse to be tied to some stupid smartphone.
Right.
And I prefer to be in a situation where I decide myself. I'm happy to read my email twice a day or something like that.
Right.
So I, as you can tell, I'm the wrong person to ask that question.
So that's pretty clear example, especially.
No, I do happen to know there's a development called cryptocurrencies, and I have a good friend at Carnegie Mellon University who has studied. His name is Ariel Zetlin Jones, and he has studied that phenomenon and claims to me that it's very important. And he was even invited to Davos to give a presentation about it. So I don't rule out that it's important. I just don't know anything myself about it.
Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you, Professor, for the honest answer. And the fact that probably smartphone only for stupid people, whereby the casual phone is for smart person like you.
I'm not saying anything.
Okay. With that, unfortunately, we are running out of time. Participants here in BINUS University auditoriums, and I guess also on others through video conference, and those who watch us through BINUS TV online stream, I think hopefully you learn a lot from what we have today, seminar from Nobel Laureate Professor Finn Kydland. And let's give a warm round of applause for the Professor Kydland for the seminar today. Do you want to have final 2 or 3 words for us, or things, advice for the students here before we close the seminar?
I tend to give only 2 pieces of advice to students.
Right.
One is learn more mathematics.
learn more mathematics. Okay, that's one.
And the second is, so I regard myself as very lucky. I kind of fell into becoming a professor. It's not something I expected I would do. I thought, when I started in the business school, I thought I will become a director of a company, I will make big money, and so on. Becoming a professor, of course, you make much less than directors of a company. But I regarded myself as extremely lucky to have ended up in that profession. So the message I would suggest is, don't necessarily look for the most is the word remunerative profession, where you can earn the most. Look for something you love, you really love to do. And I've been happy to take a much lower salary in return for doing what I love to do, and I ended up where I did because of a mentor who sort of pushed me in that direction. As far as I see, he saved me from a boring life, and so, but that's obviously according to my preferences.
Okay, thank you, Professor. So 2 things, learn more about mathematics and do what you love to do. Yeah. Thank you, Professor. With that, I return the mic, I return the control to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kydland, for sharing with us your most valuable knowledge. Last but not least, we would like to present a token of appreciation from BINUS University. I would like to invite the CEO of Nusantara, Bapak Bernard Gunawan, accompanied by Bapak Michael Hadi Puspito, Managing Director, Bapak Kuncoro, Vice Rector Academic, Bapak Johan, Vice Rector Student Affairs and Community Development, Bapak Idris, Director of BINUS at Bekasi, and Ibu Dia Wihardini, Director of BINUS Global. Would also like to invite Mr. Uwe Morawetz, the Chairman of International Peace Foundation, on stage. Token of appreciation from Bapak Bernard Gunawan to Professor Kydland. Followed by token of appreciation to Mr. Uwe Morawetz, Chairman of International Peace Foundation. Please give a round of applause. Yes, group picture now with all the leaders and key figures of this lecture. We would like to inform that the press conference will be held in small boardroom in 2nd floor, just 1 floor below us. To all of our media partners and invitees, please proceed to the mentioned venue. Thank you very much for the group picture. To wrap up, we would like to express our gratitude for all the participating parties. We hope that this event is fruitful and will lead to wider opportunity. Thank you and have a great weekend, everyone.